Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place. They're back with another Star Wars story. Today we'll be discovering what would have happened had Darth Vader upgraded his suit. Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of the Pente Patrol team. Won a chance to win in our next giveaway, which is a lightsaber. Watch to the end of the video and I will tell you exactly how you go in. Our story begins inside of Coruscant's Grand Medical Facility. The building was being used by all upper-class citizens in the galaxy's capital. Senators, chancellors, and even Jedi used it. That was before the Jedi were erased from the galaxy. It had only been a couple of days since the fall of the Galactic Republic. The Republic didn't really fall. It was more so just turned into the Galactic Empire. The Chancellor of the Republic reformed the entire Senate and crowned himself into Emperor of the Galaxy. No one could really stop him. He executed Order 66, which wiped out almost all of the Jedi in the galaxy, and his clone army was completely loyal to him, and most of the Senate sided with him anyways. Palpatine played the long haul politically, and he won because of it. He won 2 elections without much issue, and he started and ended the Clone Wars, though most people didn't know about that, or basically no one did. Though the fact was that he was responsible for the Clone Wars, and this all eluded everyone's mind. No one knew he was responsible, and the few who did were all dead. All killed by Anakin. Palpatine was the Sith Lord, who was behind the invasion of Naboo 13 years beforehand, and it was all a part of an elaborate plot to take down the Jedi, so that he could crown himself Emperor of the Galaxy. His newest pupil was named Darth Vader, and he assisted Palpatine with surviving an encounter with the Jedi's Master of the Order, Mace Windu. Anakin cut off Mace's hand, and from there Sidious was able to electrocute him, sending him out of the building. Afterwards, Sidious sent the newly crowned Darth Vader to the Jedi Temple to kill everyone. Anakin obeyed as he and the 501st knocked down the gates of the Jedi Temple and killed everyone inside. While there were a few survivors, many who escaped during the siege, they fled into hiding, in which to avoid the Empire at all costs. The fall of the Jedi was rather traumatic of an event for the Jedi, and even for some of the civilians, as it came so far out of left field. But now, here was Anakin Skywalker. He lost his duel to his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vader was a bit out of his mind at this point. He couldn't do much. He was just a body without limbs. He had stubs at each of his legs and each of his arms, all of them being cut off by a lightsaber, 3 of the limbs off by Kenobi, and 1 by Dooku. Anakin was dealing with it, and it was a lot of turmoil. He was the Jedi's chosen one before he turned to the dark side and wiped out the Jedi Order. Anakin became known as Darth Vader, but was he really Darth Vader? In Anakin's mind, he wasn't really sure. He was still coming to grasps with reality, flashbacks after flashbacks, and yet it all felt surreal. There was so much pain for Anakin Skywalker that he spent almost every waking moment inside of the Bacta tank thinking. He put on the suit momentarily when he was placed inside of the Bacta afterwards. The suit brought him to life. Little did he realize it was the life of his wife that brought him back. His master, Darth Sidious, manipulated the Force to take Padme's life and give it to her husband. It was a tragedy, sure, but Anakin didn't know this. All he knew is that he killed her. Nothing more than that. Nothing else could be said in relation to it. Simply, he killed her in his anger. There was nowhere for Anakin to run from that, even if he could run. Anakin's first few days as Darth Vader were miserable, spent all in Bacta. The cold liquid coursed over his scarred, burnt skin, and the chilling Bacta was almost too painful to bear as it lined itself up against 3rd-degree burns. Anakin's skin was torn apart, and not even the Bacta or the Force could make that pain go away. Part of Anakin hoped that he would find peace, maybe in death. But death never came. The Angel of Death did instead, and gave him a second chance. It was a trick. The Angel was a devil, and he was the most powerful one seen in millennia. Anakin sat in a tank, sometimes with thoughts, other times with memories. Most of all, fell back on the last 48 hours of actually being Anakin Skywalker. Anakin more than anything wanted that time back. He wished he could hug Padme once more, or at the very least tell her that he loved her. Maybe tell Ahsoka how proud of her he was, or tell Obi-Wan how thankful he was. Sure, this was Anakin speaking, but after seeing how wrong the fall of the Republic went not just for the Jedi, but for himself, how could he not feel as such? There was also this other side to Anakin. It was the one that looked into the eyes of the terrified little children and rang them through with a lightsaber. The same Anakin that watched hope fill people's eyes before he took it out of them. It wasn't a split personality nor another being. It was all a part of Anakin Skywalker. It was just a battle to determine who would come out on top. The anger that a former slave carried all of his life, or the core values a slave mother taught her beloved little boy that turned an angry kid with the galaxy against him into a powerful leader and a good man. The choice wasn't easy. Well, it was in a way. It was always hard to be a good man, to show compassion, kindness, patience especially. Some of those values came very easily, especially around loved ones or those in need. They were harder to show when someone like Windu was breathing down one's neck. But on the other hand, of being a good man, it was incredibly easy to be a bad one. Hate, greed, passion, strength. The core values of the Sith were easy. Sure, having passion and strength weren't naturally bad, but using them in unappealing ways could turn any heart to darkness. Anakin showed that when his greed turned an entire order upside down. He allowed all the anger from a slave inside of him pile up, and then all of a sudden, it burst at the wrong moment. Sure, it was Mace Windu, but it led to Anakin's ignorance and arrogance, both of which lost him his love, his limbs, and his life. Anakin thought while he hung in his bacta tank. Sure, he wasn't really hanging, but suspended with metallic straps latched into his back, suffocating in his own breathalyzer. It was nothing short of paralyzing. Vader opened his eyes. They were bloodshot. He hadn't been able to sleep since Mustafar. How could he? It was traumatic. Anakin's eyes met his gaze as it blankly stared back at him inside of the bacta tank's reflection, like facing death in his eyes. He'd seen death, he felt it, and he did die. Reborn meant to be Vader. When the mask was put on, he died. But the evil man saved his life with his wife's. Anakin looked at the burns covering his body. He saw the lack of hair anywhere, and the lack of emotional expression on his face. He thought of crying, but he couldn't breathe. He just sat there and let the bacta cover his body. Anakin thought about Kenobi for a moment. He hadn't really done much of that since Mustafar. Well, he kind of did after he accidentally force-pushed Sidious and the Dark Lord, electrocuted him, and told him that if he ever did that again, he would finish what Kenobi started. That was a deep cut. Obi-Wan defiled him. Anakin didn't look like anything. He didn't look like any normal being in any star system in a galaxy. He was a hunk of worthless flesh, and his mind dragged him to Kenobi. He thought about the chance he had. Obi-Wan didn't want to fight, but Anakin egged him on. Obi-Wan did what he needed to do without finishing the job. Was it punishment or mercy? Kenobi didn't have the heart to kill Anakin. That much was for sure. Part of Anakin wanted to apologize to Obi-Wan, but the other part of him wanted to rip Obi-Wan apart. Anakin moved his head back, around, as he thought about Ahsoka and the likelihood of her surviving the 501st. There was no report of that ship being anywhere, so maybe she did survive or maybe she died. The chances that Ahsoka Tano died was extremely possible. This was also a hefty blow to Anakin's morale, as Anakin, losing everyone, left a mark that not even Mustafar could show. While he was finally coming around to actually thinking about other people like Ahsoka, Rex, and Kenobi, he genuinely spent the first couple days of this space gulag thinking about what he could have done differently. There are so many scenarios in his mind. He should have stayed in the council chambers. No, he should have stayed with Padme. No, he should have forced his way on the mission and killed Palpatine. He never should have gone to Mustafar. He never should have fought Kenobi. He never should have let Padme out of his sight. He never should have raised his hand to choke her. Anakin's thoughts would have had him in tears if the bacta didn't currently already surround his face. Anakin's attention was drawn to the door when a hooded man came in flanked by 2 Royal Imperial guards. This was his master. Sidious snickered when his eyes landed on Anakin. Says he asked him how his rest was. Anakin didn't say a word as he looked at him. Sidious rolled his eyes as he moved over to the side of the room and told Vader to prepare to come out. Sidious was going to show him what they were about to celebrate. Vader did a bit hesitantly, but he was placed inside of his suit and he was ready to go. He and his master walked around the Imperial complex as Sidious started mouthing off a plan. It was essentially that Vader would have to do some mundane tasks, while his master didn't really do anything more than maintain his new empire. Vader and the Emperor loaded up into a shuttle and were taken to an undisclosed location, where the two of them would walk for a good while. And then Sidious would show Vader an opening where they could see Mas Amedda holding up a tiny lightsaber in front of a massive crowd. Within moments, the lightsaber is thrown into a huge furnace that ignited, and hundreds of lightsabers recovered from the Jedi Temple were burnt up. Vader continued to follow his master throughout Coruscant, as Sidious continued to highlight some of what his new student would have to do for him. Though these tasks sounded rudimentary, they were important. Not really. They were just what Sidious wanted his student to do. Sidious wanted to make Vader feel that his time was not being wasted. In all actuality, it was most certainly being wasted, and there was very little he could do about that change. Sidious also announced plans for a group of Force users that would serve the Empire in due time, though that was nothing for Vader to worry about for now. As the two of them made their way back into the Emperor's office, he informed Vader of his first couple missions. Sidious made sure to tell Vader that he had to complete all the missions before he could even think about returning to Coruscant. Vader didn't really appreciate the tone, but what could he do? He was helpless in the suit, and he no longer had his lightsaber, considering it was lost on Mustafar. Vader wondered if he'd ever get the opportunity to wield a lightsaber again. He assumed for the most part that Sidious would just continue to punish him for his failure without giving him the opportunity to make up for his greatest mistake. The first very few missions he assigned Vader made Vader wish that Obi-Wan speared him in the head with a lightsaber. They were so mundane, so simple, just go and retrieve missions. This deepened Vader's seething rage, which was fully intended. Sidious knew that propping up the Jedi Anakin Skywalker's hero, the one of the Clone Wars, would provide Vader with a lot of turmoil once he was sent to messenger boy duties, and with the Jedi Order displaced by the Sith would take over rule of the galaxy, effective immediately. Sidious had no one else to worry about. His rivals in politics all became invisible to him once he took the helm of the Emperor's role. Sidious had his reasonings for keeping Vader out of his eyes. He wanted to make sure his new apprentice was isolated. Of course, the Emperor could feel the changing balance inside of Anakin, good and bad. If he allowed Anakin to sit alone for any longer with nothing to do, he could discover mechanics and find something to bring himself joy. But Palpatine would never let Anakin have any of that back. He was just now a servant, especially until Sidious found himself a far younger and much more powerful servant to take his place. Sidious never planned on having a replacement for Vader, but now he would have to find one. It wasn't urgent, Vader was still functional and he was still loyal, so Sidious had plenty of time to get comfortable with his new apprentice until the best next thing came along, and Sidious could bury Vader alive. For the next several months, Vader would go on arduous journeys across the galaxy, in which he would be tasked with the most mundane and boring things. Almost all of these missions were carrier missions, where Vader had to travel all the way from Coruscant to find some ancient Sith artifact hidden on one of numerous amount of worlds. This meant that Vader would have to search over and over again in certain planets because once he brought back one artifact, he was immediately sent back out for another. This built a rage inside of Vader that heightened how angry he was over his defeat. Anakin would never stand for this, but Vader had to. It was the pain of his loss. He had to deal with things that his former self would have never took a part of. Vader would eventually be rewarded, in which he would have the opportunity to collect his first lightsaber. It was a difficult task. A Sith had to kill a Jedi to take their lightsaber and then bleed it. Vader's first Jedi kill, since he lost to Kenobi, was a Jedi monk. It was a battle that Vader almost lost. Because the Jedi was too concerned about others, he allowed Vader to continue living and defeat him. From the death of this Jedi, Vader was able to collect no lightsaber. So after a difficult battle of nearly being beaten, Vader found another Jedi and was able to kill this Jedi for his lightsaber. Through a long series of boring events, Vader would encounter Lord Momin during his attempt to bleed his lightsaber. This trip through memory lane on Mustafar with Lord Momin would drag Vader deeper and deeper down into the depths of the dark side. His infatuation with revenge fueled him to become a vile creature of darkness. Vader couldn't help but bathe in the deaths of others. He thrived off their fear and summoned every ounce of terror he could from them before he killed them. Yet here on Mustafar, he felt he would build his castle here. Vader had other intentions, of course, one of them figuring out how to bring Padme back from the dead, but for now he would play the game until he could overthrow his master. Vader's new lightsaber resembled the one of Anakin Skywalker, and maybe it was just an ounce of Vader holding on to the past. That's how Sidious would view it, at least. For Vader, it was more of the comfortability of the grip, and how it functioned in his hands when he used it, and it kind of reminded him of his old lightsaber, which he really did like. With a new lightsaber, Vader was promoted from errand boy to murderer. While the Jedi Order fell and was executed by the clones during Order 66, from an order of 10,000, there were still hundreds of Jedi that still survived amongst the stars. Some of them were former Jedi Council members, such as Yoda, Kenobi, Oppo Rancice, Coleman Kajak, and Shaak Ti. It was a sizable list of Jedi Masters, and it was a perfect list for Vader to want to hunt down and kill. Though there was also something that would piss off Vader more than anything else. This secret legion of Force users that the Emperor had been recruiting, called the Inquisitorius. Sidious was creating this group of former Jedi to finish off the Jedi while he and Vader focused on the more important tasks of running an empire. While Sidious noticed, he didn't anticipate Vader to hone in on revenge against the Jedi so specifically, and not want to do anything else other than that. Vader went out of his way to kill Jedi, and while he was a Sith and Sidious should be proud of him, it was getting on his nerves. Vader was using all of his time to hunt Jedi and slaughter them instead of focusing on the much more important rule of the Empire. Because of Vader's inability to focus on what really mattered to the Empire, he was causing Sidious to rely on others to do his mundane tasks, and he wanted those for Vader. It would continuously make his little errand boy more subservient. The slaughter of Jedi was giving Vader his mojo back. He was feeling more confident once again, and he felt like he could finally take the fight back to the Emperor. But because Sidious was already steps ahead of Vader, he forced Vader back into his mundane tasks and stole all of that mojo away from his apprentice. Vader's disappointment was great, but it would be amplified when Vader was introduced to the Inquisitors and told he had to train them. Vader couldn't believe Sidious was being serious. These Jedi were betraying their order because it was the safest option. Did they want to be evil? Probably not. They were just all functionally weak, and even at their highest potential, they couldn't even stop a true Jedi Master. They were just doing this to survive. Vader knew this would be a worthless task for him, and even more so a worthless task for him to take his time to do. He would just be teaching a bunch of fools who would fail the moment they got to battle, a real battle at least. The Grand Inquisitor and Vader got a little close, but nothing too extreme. Vader, on the other hand, would begin to train the Inquisitorius, and through his first training session with them, each and every single one of them, other than the Grand Inquisitor, had their limbs removed. Not all of their limbs, but a hand, a forearm, or a couple fingers. Vader was going to do this to solidify their commitment to the Sith and to the Empire. Through several days of training, Vader would be relieved when he got a message from his master. His mission was to go out to a distant planet, find and kill a group of Jedi insurgents. With the group of former council members that were out there, the chances of facing Kenobi were highly likely. Vader hoped that he could rematch Kenobi, but something told him it wouldn't be Kenobi. Instead, it would be another council member. He was still wrong. When he arrived, he realized there was no council member, but this was one of the most experienced groups of Jedi he'd ever seen since Operation Nightfall. There were 3 Jedi Masters and 7 Jedi Knights present. This was what Vader would thrive off of. He needed to kill, and he wanted to kill. It made him feel power. So, when Vader dropped down from the ceiling in a massive slam, the Jedi's resolve went from calm to panic. They all knew of Vader. He had a reputation. He was known by Imperials, rebels, citizens, and especially Jedi. He was the leader of the most elite Imperial Corps, and he showed no mercy. When Vader stood in the middle of the group of Jedi, they were all momentarily paralyzed as they took in the magnitude of his size. Vader towered over the Jedi, and they all stared at the caped man with the heavy, robotic breathing. Vader didn't move as he examined each of the Jedi. It was ironic. As much as he tried to forget Anakin Skywalker, he did exactly what Skywalker would have done. And even more ironic than that, Skywalker learned this trick from his master, Master Hello There. Vader turned around when he heard a lightsaber ignite. The young man screamed as he charged Vader, and immediately Vader was ready as he used the Force to pull the man into his glove and crush his windpipe. Vader whipped around as he ignited his lightsaber and slammed it down on another Jedi's blade. The several Jedi turned around and ignited their lightsabers as they all moved in simultaneously. Vader slashed back and forth as he used the Force to keep the Jedi near him, away from him. Vader was always clunky and hard to move, but this made him truly realize how vulnerable it made him, as the Jedi landed a strike on his left arm. Vader immediately was caught off guard by this. He hadn't been damaged by a Jedi in so long. Vader then took a hit across the back as he tumbled forward. Vader turned around and threw one of the Jedi up into the ceiling and shoved their back into a spire. 2 down, 8 more to go. Vader rolled back up as he spaced himself out from the other Jedi. He swung violently as his blade met another Jedi's blade. His swing was so ferocious, he knocked her off her feet. She tumbled down, and a shock filled her eyes as she looked up at Vader. His attention turned from her as he parried another attack. Vader was, for being so big, surprisingly fast to the Jedi. Anakin used to be much faster, but there was a benefit to Vader being Vader. His suit gave him so much more strength than a normal human being would have. Most of his hits would be able to knock a Jedi off their feet, so when Vader defended himself, he used his strength to throw Jedi from their feet. Vader swung back and forth again, as 2 more Jedi were pushed back, and Vader found himself confronting a Jedi Master. Vader thrived off of this environment of high stress and excitement. Vader's blade swung and blinded the Jedi as he moved with precision. Vader then decided to amp up the stakes as he used the Force to crush the lighting system in the room, dropping the lights from the ceiling as one of them crushed a Jedi. He was still alive, just unable to get out from under the massive tile. Now, all that lit the room were 7 green and blue lightsabers and 1 crimson blade. From the Dark Lord himself. Vader turned around into a sea of blue and green and slashed down, watching burn marks spread across someone's body as a Jedi dropped down to the ground. Vader counted each death as he turned and grabbed another Jedi with his hand and swung them around at Jedi coming at him. The Jedi he was holding cried out when one of his peers' blade passed through his chest. Vader shoved the Jedi further back on the blade, toppling them down on top of the Jedi behind them. Vader threw his blade forward as it cut down 2 more Jedi. Vader whipped the blade back into his hands as he turned around and began an offensive attack on the Jedi Master. One of the last 3. Vader moved heavy and hard as the Jedi used both of his hands to try and keep the blade steady as he was thrown back and forth off of his feet. Vader swung down harder and harder. The Jedi screamed out as he tried to put fear into Vader's heart, but the Dark Lord only stared at him menacingly while their blades interlocked. All that could be heard was the breathing. Vader then swung across, up and then down. The 3-point saber combo killed the Jedi almost instantaneously. Vader whipped around as he saw the last 2 Jedi, waiting for their opportunity to kill him. This wouldn't even be worth Vader's time. It would, but he felt cool thinking that. Vader stepped forward as he awaited for their approach, his armor still damaged, but he stood tall and strong, maybe even a bit cocky. This little bit of cockiness was well earned. He just whipped the floor with 8 Jedi, though these Jedi would make him pay for it. As they moved at opposite sides and different speeds, Vader was ready as he stood back and struck at the faster one and parried the slower one. This was a master and apprentice duo. Though the apprentice was a knight now, they had the bond to take Vader on together. The master jumped forward and pushed Vader back, as her former apprentice jumped around the side and attacked Vader with ferocity. Vader was thrown from his feet unsuspectingly and tumbled to the ground and looked at his arm, which was torn up entirely. Gears and wires thrown out of it, sticking out as he felt the maneuverability from his arm go. He had very little control of it, and he realized he had a true challenge. Vader steadied himself back up to his feet as his opponents looked down at him. Vader's impatience got the best of him as he jabbed forward only to be slashed across his robotic plates on the chest. Vader tumbled back to the ground. He looked up, and for the first time, he looked defeat in his eyes. But with his mask on, he could see a lot better in the dark. He looked up and saw something as he used his damaged left hand to crush a piece of ceiling. Vader crushed the entire piece and allowed gravity to do the job, as the Jedi began to monologue at him, both of them ready to end the legacy of Vader, as his heavy breathing sounded shaken and broken. The Jedi were then slammed into the wall, destroying their entire bodies. Their lightsabers falling to the ground as Vader slowly got himself up with his broken breathing. Vader crept over towards the remaining Jedi who was still crushed under the light fixture. They called out the names of the other Jedi in the dark. He couldn't see anything, and then when the breathing got closer, their fear escaped out of their mouth and they screamed for mercy. Vader showed none as he twisted their neck with the Force and left the location. When Vader returned to the ship, he realized how much damage he took. This would take a team of repair droids to fix. Vader felt that just a touch-up was a bit of an understatement. Anakin would have never struggled that much with that amount of Jedi. He needed maneuverability and a suit that would be better protecting for him a lightsaber strike and from his master's lightning. Vader then had an idea. What if he upgraded his own suit? This was an option before, but the variation of the suit that he would be placed in would probably kill him. So instead, if he modified the version of the suit he had now, maybe he could perfect the version of what he needed and what he wanted. Though Vader wouldn't want just any suit, he would call upon 2 scout teams and send them to 2 undisclosed locations across the galaxy. He had a very specific design intended for his armor that he would construct. He intended on becoming the most powerful Sith the galaxy had ever seen, and he was going to take his mantle as Sith Lord. Vader's specific request would eventually be brought back to him. As he sat inside of a makeshift suit, he had the repair droids construct him. He was still breathing with his breathing apparatus, and he had 2 arms that were rather rudimentary, but they weren't as bulky as Vader's other gloves. Vader's internal design for this suit was brilliant. Bringing it to life, on the other hand, was something else. By the time the scouts returned, Vader had constructed a makeshift shell, and now he was going to complete it. One group of scouts went to a trash planet and collected pieces and parts that belonged to B-2 super battle droids and CIS commando droids. The other group of scouts went back to the desolate landscape of Mandalore and collected as much Beskar as they could. While what Vader ordered these 2 groups to do was illegal and forbidden from the Empire, they would much rather face the wrath of the Empire than that of Vader. Though Vader was ecstatic when he got everything he wanted. Immediately, he and the repair droids brought to life this wonderful creation that Vader envisioned. The suit was remarkable. It was thin, lean, fit, and powerful. The suit was built entirely out of Beskar, without a weak spot on it. On the other hand, the suit was blaster resistant, lightsaber defendable, and lightning proof. Even more than that, the gears inside the suit that belonged to some of the most powerful droids in the Separatist arsenal. The B-2 super battle droid was the same kind of gears that a super tactical droid had, the same droid that fist-fought Anakin Skywalker once upon a time. These droids had hit a force of several thousand pounds, and now Skywalker had that on his body. His legs had extreme force so that he could run faster, and his arms were much stronger than Anakin's and Vader's were. On top of everything, the suit maneuvered like that of a normal human being. But with all the metallic parts and being made of Beskar, the suit was more powerful than anything Vader could have ever imagined for himself. Last few touches Vader made were to his helmet. He kept the same design because it was intimidating, but he made the mask thinner and the visibility of the suit much better. The suit was perfect. It defended Vader from his greatest threats, Sidious, blaster fire, and lightsabers. Vader's several hour-long project would have him moving with more focus and excitement than he'd ever had as Darth Vader. Vader forgot how great it was to be a mechanic again. It brought a renewed sense of life, and it made him super happy. While no happiness would bring Vader back to the light side of the Force, this happiness would bring Vader something else, something much more crucial to his situation. It would bring him the confidence to take what was his. But first, he was being summoned to the bridge. The bridge was summoning him to Hypori. A group of clone troopers that were guarding a base went missing, and their armor was found with lightsaber wounds. Vader was so excited to get a test on his new suit of armor, and he got the tested out on another Jedi. Little did he know, he was walking into what was supposed to be a trap. On Hypori, Vader entered the remnants of a Republic base. It was now Imperial, but the entire base had been emptied out. The clones who were stationed here were veterans of the war, that were essentially left behind by the Empire. Hypori was an important staging ground during the Clone Wars, but for several years it wasn't needed or used by the Empire. It just kept clones there for no real reason at all. It saved them time, strategy, and money by keeping them there without moving them around. There was no reason to worry about security on Hypori because of the clone presence, so they were just kept there. But as Vader entered the hollowed-out base, he realized that this destruction was intentional. It was vengeful. Vader looked down at some of the clone troopers, still in their Phase 2 armor, as he realized that the death of these clones came from an angry Jedi. Vader stumbled under fallen ceiling panels and hanging lighting fixtures. He could notice the destruction. fallen clones whilst in retreat. It wasn't traditional Jedi behavior. There were very few Jedi who would ever do this, even to the clones. Vader knew the Jedi, he understood how they functioned, and he knew how they treated others. This particular Jedi hunted down these clones, and made them fear for their final moments within his presence. These clones tried to escape from this Jedi, and were cut down in their escape. Vader didn't really care for the clones, but for the purpose of understanding his opponent, he came to realize one of the few Jedi that this could be. And by the essence of the presence he could feel around him, he knew exactly what Jedi it was. Vader continued to walk under the hanging lights and flickering lights as he walked through the corridors of the facility. Creaking and crashing could be heard from all around him as Vader's heavy footsteps littered the halls he walked. The echoes could be heard throughout the entire complex. Vader turned around a corner and saw more clone bodies. He could care less for the clones that died here, but he did care about which Jedi made their way through these halls. Vader stepped over the bodies and continued walking through the corridors alone. Vader stopped and turned around. He looked down the hallway and then back down the one he was heading towards. Silence echoed through Vader's helmet. Vader continued walking. He stopped again and looked down an adjacent hallway in which he saw half a clone and a closed door. It seemed as if one of the clones tried to escape and the blast door shut on him, leaving him to a painful death. Vader turned his head forward and continued walking. He looked into a large hangar bay and found several bodies littered around. A large group of the bodies were littered in a circle, as if they tried to protect each other and then failed to do so against the likes of this particular Jedi. Vader continued walking through the hallways as he heard footsteps following him. Vader whipped his head back and around as he looked down the hallway and saw no one. When Vader turned back around, he saw a swinging light switch that was flickering. Behind that, he saw a silhouette. The shadow looked familiar. Vader then looked behind him and saw 3 smaller shadows. None of these shadows were human in their form. There was a taller one, and then on the sides of the shadow, 2 beings with a number of tails. Vader placed his metallic hand on his waist as he looked down the hallway, and then heard the name Skywalker echo out towards him. Vader looked at the silhouette that called to him, but nothing rang a bell until an amethyst lightsaber ignited from the shadows. Vader knew exactly who it was, as he looked at it, and the silhouette mocked him from a distance. Vader then turned around and looked at the 3 blades from the opposite hallway. All 3 of these blades were emerald colored. Vader then turned back around as he stood strong and awaited one of the sides to make a move. It was a standoff. Vader waited patiently. He didn't take his eyes off of Windu, which led the 3 behind him to believe that they could take advantage of his lack of attention towards them. They were so wrong. The 3 Jedi lunged forward as they tried to take advantage of Vader's lack of attention towards them, and then when they got close without budging, the blast door closed in front of their faces. Vader stepped forward as he told Windu that revenge was not the Jedi way. Windu spoke up telling Vader that betraying the Jedi was not the motherfucking Jedi way. Windu stepped forward as he stared down Vader. The Dark Lord ignited his lightsaber as he readied himself to fully take on the Jedi Master. This would be a difficult opponent, regularly, but it seemed as if Mace Windu was harboring the dark side, ready to use that dark side to tear Vader apart. The Sith Lord would not stand for it, as he and Mace at the same time sped up as they ran towards each other. Vader got a good feel for his new suit as he let his legs get into a widened stance as he entered a full sprint. Windu did the same in his old age as he jumped up and struck down at Vader. The Dark Lord blocked his attack as he responded back with a fierce parry. Windu and Vader interlocked in a stiff duel. Their blades moved at magnificent speeds as their sabers cut through the corridors they stood in between. Vader and Windu had no words to say. This was a 13-year rivalry of hate, tension, from when they were both a part of the Jedi Order, even more years tacked on top of that. Anakin had his revenge now. It was time Windu put the Chosen One in his place, like he should have long time ago. Windu and Vader reinstated their disliking for one another as their blades clashed in the hallway. The door behind Vader opened as he raged. Vader was not having his moment to defeat Windu throw him off. These little Jedi ran at him, and without a second thought, Vader threw them back through the door that they came through. Vader then turned back around and swung violently at Windu. This was a match up the galaxy had been waiting for. Vader finally had the poise, strength, and confidence to fully defeat Windu, and he was ready to do it. Vader swung at Windu, who parried each and every strike at him. Windu used all of Vader's darkness for his own power. Vader pushed harder and harder, but Windu was ready each and every time. He could tell that Vader was angry, and he was thriving off of Vader's anger. Vader's anger made him weak, and it made Mace more powerful. But Mace's power of the pod ensured that he'd be able to defeat any darkside Force user. Vader was no exception. The two of them spun around and clashed blades once more. Their continuous output of striking against one another ensured that the other would have to stay focused and determined the entire time during this onslaught. Windu used the Force and pushed Vader back, but he caught himself. The Dark Lord then looked at Windu as he turned around to see the three blades standing behind him. Vader recognized the silhouettes as their lightsabers showed who they were: the youngling Wookiee Gungi, the red Twi'lek youngling Daisha Numa, and the Natalan youngling Zat. All three of these Jedi were primed and ready to become Jedi Padawans up until Anakin slaughtered everyone in the temple. Vader remembered slaughtering their classmates, especially those from Gungi's class. After all, it was hard to forget a Wookiee Jedi. Vader turned around and the three Jedi approached him. Vader threw a wave of force at Windu as he tumbled back and looked at the three Jedi that were coming at Vader. Gungi roared as he lunged forward. Daisha and Zat were right behind him. Vader pushed forward as he blocked and parried Gungi before shoving him into a wall nearby. Vader turned around and smacked his blade against Zat's as Daisha moved in. Vader kicked her in the stomach and punched her in the face. Vader then turned around and looked at Gungi, who yelled and attacked forward again. Vader wasn't standing for this either, but the young Wookiee warrior was powerful. Vader blocked a strike as he attacked back, using his strength to push Gungi up against a wall. Zat, who had watched his entire class die inside the Jedi Temple, was not going to let another classmate die before him again, as he lunged forward towards Vader. The Dark Lord felt the attack coming as he twisted his blade around and caught Zat in the strike immediately. Zat let out a final breath as Vader dragged his blade out of the young Natalan and pulled it towards Gungi, and struck faster and faster, heavier and heavier, as the Wookiee yelped in fear before he was cut across the chest. Windu from the other side of the hall started to pick up speed, trying to get to the three students he saved from the Jedi Temple. Vader pulled his blade back across Gungi as the young Wookiee cried out into an immediate death. Vader, before Windu got to him, saw the youngling Twi'lek on the ground, after being hit with a metallic hand as she tried to get back up. Vader kicked the back of her head down as he stomped on her head and slammed his blade down into Daisha's back. She died instantaneously after a painful encounter. Vader ripped his blade through Daisha's back as he collided with Windu. Vader began an offensive as he struck hard and fast against Windu. The Jedi Master tried his best to parry an attack that came his way, but it proved to no avail as he fell backwards. Vader towered over Mace as he looked down at the Jedi Master. Vader had nothing to say, and neither did Windu. The two looked at each other for a brief moment, as Windu reached out his hand and pulled the wall in towards Vader, throwing him off balance. Vader whipped around and saw Windu coming for him, as he pushed his lightsaber above his head and blocked the strike from the Jedi. Vader kicked forward and caved Windu's knee in as he howled in pain. Vader rose to his feet as he looked down at Windu. The Jedi raised his blade as he caught a glimpse of the three Jedi he failed before this fight. Vader whipped his blade forward as Windu parried the strike and stumbled back. Vader swung again, cutting through the wall and destroying panels. Windu blocked the strike again, but he stumbled back, as Vader raised his blade, cutting through the light fixtures and the ceiling panels as Windu blocked the strike from Vader, but this time falling down. Vader raised his boot and slammed it down on Mace's calf, shattering the bone and ripping the muscle apart. Vader looked down at Windu, who screamed in agony as he twisted his blade down into Mace's chest. Vader sheathed his lightsaber and turned away as his cape waved in behind him. Vader walked through the eerie hallways and back into the shuttle he arrived in. When he returned to the ISD, he ordered the captain to bombard the building he came from. Vader then returned to his quarters and thought about his triumph. Killing Mace Windu was a great honor for him. He just killed one of the most well-known Jedi Masters in the Jedi Order, and because he did, he felt a greater call to power. Vader felt that he could take on any foe. It was Mace Windu. This wasn't killing any ordinary Jedi or Jedi Master. This was killing someone who was great enough to become Master of the Order at such a young age. Vader had a lot of pride with himself, and felt the calling to become more than just an apprentice. He thought about what it would mean for him to become his own master. Vader sat in his chambers. He didn't have any other missions other than training the Inquisitorius. Vader felt close with the Grand Inquisitor in a way, mostly because the Grand Inquisitor was respectable. The rest of his band of fallen Jedi were nothing but wannabes and failures. The Grand Inquisitor was the only one with real prowess as a leader. Vader knew that the Grand Inquisitor would make an acceptable apprentice. The question is if the Grand Inquisitor would stand by him after he killed the Emperor. For Vader, it wasn't about having an apprentice, it was more so about having an ally in someone after the fall of the Emperor, because Vader would need allies once he killed the ruling power in the galaxy. If he didn't have allies, he could very easily become Valorum, with people around him and around the Senate trying to dismiss him from power. Vader did have an inclination of how he would keep his power, and instate himself as the ruling power in the galaxy. Vader sat in his personal chambers for the entire duration back to Coruscant. There was a lot of deciding he had to do. The Emperor didn't know about his suit yet, though he had a feeling the Emperor found out through some loose end in Vader's ship. But for the most part, Vader felt that he would just go into the Emperor's office and surprise him when he arrived on Coruscant. Vader's trip to Coruscant brought him through many feelings, but the main feeling he felt when he landed was that he would no longer be a slave to his master, nor to the dark side. If Vader was going to be Vader, he was going to be master alone, the one and only, and he would lead the Empire, completely subservient to him, because it wasn't Sidious who hunted down and killed Jedi. It was Vader, and if anyone was going to claim the throne, it would be him. When Vader arrived at the Imperial Senate building, he looked across the city and saw the Jedi Temple. It was currently being retrofitted as Sidious' throne room, but the Emperor was currently at the Senate building, doing his daily duties as Emperor of the Galaxy. Sidious took over the Jedi Temple as one final revenge on the Jedi. Though there was a Sith temple under the Jedi Temple that gave him extra power, Sidious had no reason to uncover it. He'd achieved all the power in the galaxy, more power than any Sith could have ever hoped to achieve. Sidious sat in his office, shooing off senators and ignoring the pleas of his people. He was a ruler, and no one could influence his decisions. They certainly couldn't impeach him, either, because they didn't have the power to do so. Vader walked into the Emperor's chambers, and looked at his master. The Emperor was completely caught off guard by Vader's entrance. He was also completely surprised by Vader's appearance. It wasn't the suit he gave Vader, and therefore, he was rather disappointed and annoyed that Vader would just go and change his suit without his permission to do so. Sidious would rise from his desk and ask Vader what it was that he was doing, and Vader told his master he was standing up for himself. Sidious saw this as a threat, and immediately raised his hands towards Vader and shot lightning out of them. Vader didn't budge as he took in all the lightning, and looked directly into Sidious' soul. Vader grinned under the mask as Sidious leapt over his desk and swung at Vader with his lightsaber. The Dark Lord of the Sith didn't budge, as he stood there motionless, looking at Sidious. Sidious hit Vader and kept his blade there, as he came to realize the blade wasn't doing the damage it should have been doing, and then Sidious realized that Vader had Beskar armor. Though Vader wanted Sidious close in quarters with him, this was all planned. It would save him time and effort, as he reached up his hand, grabbed Sidious' neck and his wrist, and he twisted the wrist, broke it with his metallic grip, before grabbing his master's lightsaber, turning it around and shoving it through Sidious' neck. The Dark Lord dropped to the ground. The several royal guards in the room turned their attention towards Vader, as they all ignited their stabs and faced down Vader. The Dark Lord dropped the Emperor's lightsaber, and told them that they now worked for him. If they reported anything they saw, then they would face a death far worse than the Emperor did. He was now their new Emperor, and they would obey his actions and his orders. The guards looked at each other, and then to Vader, and then one by one they all moved back to their stations without saying a word. Vader then requested a cleanup crew, and then he decided he would keep Sidious on the ground. He would tap on the communication device in the middle of the room, and request a couple of individuals to his new office. Vader was going to fix things up his way. It wasn't going to be resolved, then it would never be solved if he didn't do it now. Within several hours, Grand Moff Tarkin would enter his office. He was completely caught off guard by the Emperor's dead body on the ground. Vader told Tarkin to take a seat. Tarkin shakily sat down and asked the Emperor what his bidding was. Vader loved the respect, but he knew that Tarkin was sucking up. If Tarkin knew how to do anything, it was how to suck up and brown nose, and make sure he got himself as much power as he could. It took a lot to gain power in the Empire, and Tarkin implemented himself into Palpatine's pocket early in the Clone Wars. Now, with Palpatine gone, he had to ensure his longevity. Vader didn't care for suck-ups, he just needed someone to stick around and do the jobs he needed him to do. The job that Tarkin had was taking a hold of the Imperial Senate to ensure the Senate didn't do anything wrong, or think anything was wrong. Tarkin was a Moff, and Moffs were responsible for owning and governing pieces of Imperial galaxy. So, for Tarkin, this would be essentially him in the spotlight as a leader. Vader told Tarkin to snuff out those loose ends inside of the Imperial Senate, and then he dismissed his new interim emperor. Vader, of course, was assuming the role of leader in the galaxy, but as a public figure, like Tarkin was, this would ease the public into Vader's new empire, rather than Vader taking a hold of the Imperial Senate and forcing his will onto them. Vader also knew that Tarkin was cunning enough to take out every single senator that seemed to have an inclination for treachery. That's why he told him to cut off the loose ends. The second individual brought into Vader's new office was Grand Admiral Thrawn. The Grand Admiral was surprised to see the dead Emperor, but he too asked what Vader's bidding was. Vader demanded that Thrawn redevelop the Imperial military structure. Thrawn didn't need to ask what he meant, as he asked if there was anything else he needed to do. Vader told him to clean house and run a tighter ship. Then, he would lead the Empire to crush Saw Gerrera and any of the other small individual rebel cells that had been reported within the last couple of years. There weren't many with a name as large as Saw's, but Vader wanted them to be destroyed and stopped immediately. He no longer had time for little rebellions scourging around. Vader was so happy with Thrawn's resolve, and so the final individual was brought into the office, and it was the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor was brought in so that Vader could announce that the Inquisitorius was being disbanded, and Vader was going to kill every member that wasn't the Grand Inquisitor. Vader liked the Grand Inquisitor enough to keep him around, but he just wanted to let him know that the entire Inquisitorius was going to be killed by his order. The Grand Inquisitor asked if he could do anything to make that easier for Vader, and the Dark Lord just told him to gather at Fortress Inquisitorius. The next couple of months would see the scourge of the Empire's weakest links. Every single Imperial officer with rebellious or overzealous tendencies would be found executed. As for every single senator, Tarkin would have death squads of Imperial commanders go to each of their residences and bomb them out. This wasn't every senator, but the ones that weren't loyal. This would have entire families of senators like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma completely eradicated. This too killed Leia Skywalker. Vader continued back to Fortress Inquisitorius and tore apart the entire group of 12 Inquisitors. It was so much fun for Vader, because when they tried to defend themselves, it was too late. They stood no chance. Thrawn's scourge of the overzealous Imperials found a lot more loyalty within Imperial ranks. People were more focused on their missions rather than their egos, and this led to the eventual capture of Saw Gerrera. His capture didn't last long, as he and his band of rebels were executed. The rest of his rebels were also killed in a firefight, under the excruciating death of the Imperial's heel. Any other rebel cell faced the same death. With Thrawn heading the Imperial military, he was able to bring to life projects such as TIE Defender and Dark Trooper. These would be crucial implementations into the Imperial militaristic structure. With Leia and her adopted father gone, and Obi-Wan having cut himself off from the Force, never being allowed to train Luke, the hope for rebellion died with Leia. Reva was never able to join the Inquisitorius before its downfall, and Leia, because of that, was never able to give Obi-Wan the inspiration and the healing he needed to come to his own again. Owen would force Obi-Wan away into continuous obsolescence. Luke would eventually run away from his uncle and join a local gang, until his death at the hands of a Tusken Raider group during a skirmish in the Dune Seas. Vader's empire would rule with an iron fist, and with Vader in his new suit, he would continuously spend the next few years hunting down every Jedi he could, finding Eeth Koth, Coleman Kajak, and Shaak Ti as the last council members found and killed. While Yoda and Kenobi would never be found, they would wither away and die of natural deaths. The remaining Jedi would be hunted down and defeated by Emperor Vader. Once the deed was done, he returned to governing the galaxy with Tarkin as his puppet. Vader would never, ever discover the world between worlds and never find a means to finding Padme or bringing her back from the dead. Eventually, after Tarkin's natural death, Moff Gideon would take up the mantle as Vader's puppet and become the in-place Emperor of the galaxy. The Imperial military structure would never be stopped, and without the Death Star ever being constructed, the Empire would forever rule in the image of Lord Vader. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Icy Raptor, Anakin, 003, and Gort for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes in this video so that we can see what if Yoda defeated Sidious in Revenge of the Sith. It's a video you definitely don't want to miss. Also, if you want to see what if, let me know below. Or read the comments about doing crossovers. Check out Twitch, Discord, and Patreon if you want to support me in certain other ways. And if you want to know how to win in our next giveaway, go down below. There's a doc. You click on the doc, you put your name on the doc, and we are giving away 3 lightsabers at 50,000 subscribers. So hit that subscribe button. That is the only way we're gonna get that giveaway going. I only announce giveaway winners in these videos. So if you see in the comment sections, not me, it's a spam or a scammer, whichever have you. Let's talk about our story. I really like this one. For dark stories, this is probably one of my favorite dark stories. Now, for those of you that know or have been on the channel for a long time, or even found me from this video, one of my biggest, if not my biggest video, is this video title, and that's not why I did it. I did it because I'm going to be going through older videos that have titles similar to the ones that will be coming out soon, and doing newer versions of them. Not because I'm trying to rewrite old versions, but because I had no ideas for them, and that's what happened here. Now, there was an obvious callback to the other one in this one, which was the Sidious would never let Vader become a mechanic again, essentially. And that was kind of the premise for the other one. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. It's a great video. It's one of people's favorite videos of mine on the channel. But this one, I felt a darker path would suffice. I didn't want to copy and paste the other one, but I wanted to touch it up with a darker tone and kind of fill in the dark Darth Vader story, because I've been wanting to talk or do a Darth Vader story a lot recently. And this gave me the opportunity to do that. This gave me the opportunity to tell a story about Darth Vader. And I mean Darth Vader, the dark one that we wanted to see. The one that we want to see. The one that we got from Kenobi that walked through the streets and chokes families and snaps people's necks because he can. That Vader. We got that Vader here. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to give Vader this opportunity to become Darth Vader. And the best part is that doesn't really happen until probably 30-40 minutes into the story, so you kind of have to build through this and have to go through this journey with Darth Vader until you get to that point where he has the suit, the new suit of armor. And I think that development is really good as a dark side story for Vader in this. As for using a similar idea that I'd done before, I think I definitely hit the mark without touching anything similar that you've seen before. This was completely different than the other one, so I'm glad that I didn't do anything similar to that. Part of the thing that I talk about preaching on this channel is keeping original ideas and keeping original stories. Now, for those of you that know me or talk to me on the regular, I don't watch other Star Wars YouTubers. I don't, because I want all my ideas to be original, and that's what's hard about doing a video that you've already done before, is keeping everything original. And I think I hit the mark on that with this one, so let me know how you felt about that down below. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.